Before Caitlin Clark, Pete Maravich's scoring record stood as an unbreakable monument in basketball history, untouched for more than 5 decades. Constructed in a slower era without a three-point line or modern tempo, it was widely believed to be beyond reach. Generations of all-time greats passed through the sport: Jordan, LeBron, Bird, yet not one came anywhere near it. Then came a young woman from Iowa with an unlimited shooting range and a mindset forged in empty gyms, free from outside expectations. From the instant she stepped onto the college floor, she didn't simply chase history, she reconstructed it. What followed was a season that brought millions into women's basketball and demolished everything people thought was possible. This is the story of the record that shaped a generation. The record that shaped a generation. To truly appreciate what Caitlin Clark achieved, you must first understand what she was walking into. The NCAA all-time scoring record wasn't merely a number, it was a barrier.
Caitlin Clark becomes the all-time leading scorer in major college basketball history.
A ceiling so elevated that even the most celebrated athletes in the sport's entire history could never reach it. The record had been owned for more than 50 years by Pete Maravich, a Louisiana State University guard whose college career ran from 1967 to 1970. Maravich wrapped up with 2,922 career points, a total so extraordinary that it went untouched for over half a century after he left the college stage. What makes Maravich's record even more impressive, and what makes Clark's feat even more jaw-dropping, is the context surrounding those points. Pete Maravich competed in an era before the three-point line even existed.
A steal by Hudson of Atlanta to DeBusschere of New York to Maravich of Atlanta. Beautiful pass to Collins of Boston.
Beautiful pass to Collins of Atlanta. He competed before the shot clock introduced the relentless rhythm of today's game. He played during a period when freshmen weren't permitted on varsity rosters, which meant his college run spanned only 3 seasons instead of 4. And across those 3 seasons, averaging better than 44 points per night, he constructed a mountain that the sport assumed would never fall. Names like Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, none of them came within striking distance of Maravich's record during their college years.
Has missed like 5 straight shots now. Here they come again. 93-76. LSU leading. It's the Pink, a 21-footer.
None of them were remotely part of that discussion. What made Maravich's record feel untouchable wasn't simply the size of the number. It was the conditions under which it was produced. College basketball in the late 1960s was an entirely different game played in a different America. The pace was slower, more deliberate, far less dependent on the three-point shot that now drives offensive production. There was no shot clock, which allowed teams to hold possession for long stretches to protect advantages. And yet, within that environment, Maravich averaged over 44 points per contest across 3 college seasons and posted a total that no athlete in any era came within hundreds of points of matching. By the time the modern game arrived, equipped with the three-point line, the shot clock,
Curry spins, lost the ball, dribbles, 8 to shoot, crossover, stakes a 3 in front of the bench, it's good!
and the high-speed offensive style that defines basketball today, his record had been standing so long it had transformed from a benchmark into a piece of legend. It's worth taking a moment to consider just how unreachable Maravich's record appeared before Clark entered the picture. In the decades following his graduation, college basketball evolved dramatically. The three-point line was introduced in 1987, a rule adjustment specifically created to open up spacing and boost scoring. The shot clock was reduced multiple times, demanding a quicker pace and more possessions per game. Sports science, nutrition, and player development reached heights that Maravich's era never had access to. Today's college basketball player is quicker, more refined, and better prepared than any generation before. And for 37 years after the three-point line was adopted, with every one of those advantages, and in the most offensively loaded era the sport had ever produced, nobody got close to Maravich.
On their own from half court, and Golden State wins it. 33.
Until Caitlin Clark showed up and made everyone rethink what the word close even meant. And then there was LeBron James. When LeBron burst into the national spotlight as a high school player in the early 2000s, conversations about the greatest scorer in basketball history naturally followed. He was 17 years old and already competing in front of national television cameras.
Here he comes the other way. There's your first James Jam of his career.
Whoa! He was being labeled the chosen one before he had played a single professional minute. But LeBron jumped straight from high school to the NBA in 2003. He never stepped onto a college floor. The record stayed untouched. And the question of whether anyone alive could ever threaten Pete Maravich's mountain continued collecting dust. until a girl from Iowa decided to pick up a basketball and answer it on her own terms. The reason the LeBron comparison carries so much weight isn't because both players hold an identical record. It's because LeBron became the defining symbol of individual basketball greatness for an entire generation. And when Caitlin Clark began closing in on Maravich's total,
Iowa's Caitlin Clark dethroning Pistol Pete Maravich to become the top scorer in college basketball history.
the sports world instinctively reached for that same vocabulary of greatness. She was operating inside that tier of conversation, and she had fully earned her place there. The birth of basketball's biggest star, Caitlin Clark was born on January 22, 2002 in Des Moines, Iowa. She was raised in the suburb of Ames, a college town, a basketball town, a place where the rhythm of a ball bouncing on a driveway felt as natural as the wind blowing through the fields.
So you noticed even in the driveway that she liked to shoot the ball from a long ways away?
Well, it took some time, but certainly, she's played enough.
Well, it took some time, but certainly, she's played enough. Her father, Brent Clark, played college basketball. Her brothers played too. The sport was never something Caitlin selected from a list of activities. It was something she was born into and something she chased with a singular intensity that the people closest to her recognized immediately and never forgot. By the time she reached middle school, Clark was competing against boys. Not because girls' programs weren't available, but because the level of competition she required to develop simply didn't exist among her peers and in her region unless she stepped up in class. She obsessed over her shot. She built a range that extended far beyond what most guards at any level would even consider attempting. Three-point attempts from the logo at half court, launched in transition.
Wheeler finds Clark from the logo.
You bet. Released with the certainty of someone who had executed that exact shot 10,000 times in an empty gym before ever attempting it in a live game, the range wasn't a trick, it was a declaration. The shooting range Clark eventually put on display at Iowa didn't arrive fully assembled. It was constructed with intention, with obsession, through thousands of hours of repetition in gyms that held nobody but her. Those who watched Clark practice in high school described the experience of seeing her fire shots from 35 feet with the same relaxed confidence most players bring only to layups. The difference was that the shots dropped.
Clark, another long three. She's back!
At a frequency that made clear she had genuinely developed a level of shooting mastery that most professional players simply don't possess. When she arrived at Iowa and began doing the same things in Big Ten competition, pulling up from the logo, releasing three-pointers in transition with a defender sprinting at her, opposing players, and coaches initially read it as careless. 1 or 2 seasons of watching the outcomes changed their view entirely. This was mastery functioning at a range nobody had thought to prepare for. When the recruiting process began, Clark was far from unknown. She was a 5-star recruit, among the most coveted high school players in the entire country. She selected the University of Iowa, choosing to stay near home, near the state that had followed her journey. Her freshman season from 2020 to 2021 was remarkable by any standard, over 26 points per game and Big Ten Freshman of the Year honors.
Caitlin Clark has been named the Big Ten Player of the Year. This is the 3rd year in a row that Clark has won this honor.
By her 2nd season, the waiting period was over. Clark wasn't developing anymore. She was exploding. Carver Hawkeye Arena at Iowa, which had at times struggled to reach full capacity, began selling out on a consistent basis. Fans were making the trip specifically to watch her play. And Maravich's number, still impossibly distant, was for the first time in living memory no longer invisible to the naked eye. What set Clark apart from every previous candidate for greatness in women's college basketball wasn't just the scoring output, it was the combination of scoring and playmaking. Elite scorers appear regularly in college basketball, players who can average 30 points per game while also averaging 8 or 9 assists.
Finish behind the back again for Clark. Give her another assist and a chance for a three-point play for Smith.
While commanding the offense, while drawing the toughest defensive assignment from every opponent on every night, those players do not come around at any level. Clark's capacity to raise the performance of everyone around her was just as important to Iowa's success as her personal scoring totals. In the 2023-24 season, Iowa reached the national championship game, not because Clark was carrying the program alone, but because she had lifted the players sharing the floor with her. That is the mark of a truly complete player, not someone who simply scores in volume, but someone who makes winning happen. The season that rewrote history.
Oh, Caitlin Clark, rookie on rookie crime right there in Mule's face.
The 2023-24 season was the defining one. By the time it got underway, Clark had already moved into second place on the all-time NCAA scoring list, surpassing Kelsey Plum's women's record and continuing her climb toward Maravich's peak. The record-breaking moment came on February 15, 2024, during a home matchup against Michigan at Carver Hawkeye Arena in Iowa City. Not just women's basketball, not just college basketball, but the broader sports world had circled that date on the calendar. The anticipation had been building for several weeks. Sports media that had historically given little coverage to women's college basketball had been monitoring Clark's pursuit of Maravich's record with the intensity normally reserved for professional playoff chases.
That free throw pushing Clark past Pete Maravich's more than 50-year-old record, 3,667 points.
ESPN aired extended segments. Major newspapers published front-page sports features. Social media overflowed with point trackers and historical breakdowns. Opposing arenas began operating at maximum capacity, specifically because fans wanted to be present in case the record fell on their home floor. Hotels in Iowa City were completely booked on game weekends by fans who had no connection to Iowa as students or alumni, just basketball followers who recognized that a historic moment was approaching and wanted to be somewhere nearby when it arrived. Clark entered the game needing only a small number of points to move past Maravich. The crowd was on its feet before she had touched the ball on the opening possession. Every time she caught a pass, every time she crossed midcourt with the ball in her grip, the anticipation in the building was physically visible. You could sense it in the noise, in the way cameras locked onto her.
6 on the shot clock. Clark, a deep three! Oop, that is! It knocks that one down, and it's a big one!
In the way her teammates watched her, with a blend of competitive sharpness and something that resembled pure awe. And then midway through the second quarter, Clark elevated from deep. The kind of three-pointer that had become her calling card, the kind that other players don't even put up, and buried it. 2,923 career points, more than Pete Maravich, more than anyone who had ever suited up for a college basketball program. The game came to a halt. The officials paused play. The arena shifted into something closer to sacred space, a place where every person inside understood that the moment surrounding them was unlike anything ordinary. Clark's teammates rushed toward her. Her coaches wrapped their arms around her. The opposing players from Michigan stepped forward to offer congratulations. And Clark allowed herself a moment that was readable even through a television screen. Genuine emotion. Recognition that the thing she had spent her entire life working toward had actually become real. The statistics behind that moment deserve to be stated clearly. In the 2023-24 season by itself, Clark averaged over 31 points per game, a figure that would be extraordinary at any level of competition. She was also averaging nearly 9 assists per night, positioning her as one of the most complete offensive contributors in the sport's entire history. When her college career finally concluded, she had accumulated 3,951 total points. There is a specific quality to how Clark performs when the stakes reach their highest that distinguishes her from players who simply build numbers in comfortable settings. In the 2023-24 NCAA tournament, she was at her most extraordinary precisely when everything mattered most. She guided Iowa through contests where other players might have folded beneath the weight of the moment. She hit shots in closing minutes that defied both the geometry of the attempt and the mental pressure surrounding it.
For the win!
People that we were able to bring together and show how great this sport was.
And she executed all of it with a composure that suggested she had always known these moments were coming, that she had been rehearsing for them in empty gyms since she was old enough to grip a basketball. The night Caitlin Clark became a legend. When the record dropped, the reaction from the sports world arrived immediately, broadly, and without reservation. This was not the polite acknowledgement of an achievement filed away in a separate category from the mainstream discussion. This was the sports world recognizing without hesitation that something with genuine historical weight had just taken place. Coaches, analysts, former players, and media voices across every platform responded with the kind of language typically saved for the rarest of occasions. LeBron James, who had spent 2 decades as the measuring stick for individual excellence in basketball, acknowledged Clark publicly. And the significance of that acknowledgement was not missed by anyone paying attention. Here was the player who had defined basketball greatness for an entire generation, recognizing a 22-year-old from Iowa who had just accomplished something in college basketball.
The WNBA, Caitlin Clark, dominating the court, inspiring young women in many ways in her sport and people just to play sports
That nobody in the sport's history had ever managed. The fact that the conversation existed at all, that LeBron's name and Caitlin Clark's name were appearing together in the same sentence by serious analysts without irony or qualification, was itself a measurement of how dramatically Clark had shifted the conversation around women's basketball. The broadcast reaction to the record-breaking moment captured something that raw statistics are unable to convey. The television commentators, seasoned professionals who had narrated thousands of basketball games, the play-by-play call of the moment Clark moved past Maravich was not composed or professionally neutral. It was unfiltered, the voices strained. There was a pause that broadcasting professionals spend careers learning to avoid. The pause of someone experiencing something emotionally rather than describing it technically. That pause, replayed endlessly across social media in the hours that followed, communicated more clearly than any detailed breakdown what the moment actually meant. These were individuals who had watched basketball at the highest level their entire adult lives and had encountered nothing quite like what they were witnessing. The historical weight of what Clark achieved extended well beyond sports media into the broader cultural conversation. Major news organizations that rarely touch college sports published feature stories. Political figures and cultural voices with no particular tie to basketball offered their own reflections. The record fell during a period of intense national discussion about women's sports, about equal investment, equal viewership.
Iowa's Caitlin Clark became the leading scorer in the NCAA Division I basketball, woman or man.
Equal respect. And Clark's achievement landed like a punctuation mark at the end of that conversation. The argument that women's sports doesn't generate performances worthy of mainstream attention had been losing ground for years. In 2024, it fell apart entirely. Here was a performance, a career, an achievement that demanded to be seen on its own terms, and the sports world, to its real credit, did exactly that. It's worth being specific about the nature of the LeBron comparison because specificity matters here. LeBron James and Caitlin Clark did not compete in the same league, the same era, or against the same opposition. The people drawing the LeBron comparison were not suggesting identical circumstances. What they were communicating, what coaches and analysts with decades of basketball knowledge were saying, was that Clark's effect on the sport and on the conversation about individual greatness. Multiple opposing coaches spoke publicly about the exhausting and ultimately insufficient experience of constructing game plans around Clark, accounting for every weapon in her arsenal, and still watching her locate something they hadn't covered. How Caitlin Clark built a new era. When you pull back from the number from 2009-22 and the single point that carried Clark past it, you find a story about far more than a scoring milestone. You find a story about what unfolds when an extraordinary individual arrives in a sport at the precise moment that sport needs one most. Women's college basketball before Caitlin Clark was a sport with a passionate but contained audience. What it lacked was a mainstream crossover moment. A single player capable of drawing the broader sports audience in from outside its existing base and making them stay. Clark was that moment. The television ratings for the 2023-24 Iowa women's basketball season were staggering. Regular season contests were drawing audiences that women's college basketball had never produced. The NCAA tournament that year generated viewership totals historic, not just for women's basketball, but for college basketball as a whole. The national championship between Iowa and South Carolina attracted over 24 million viewers.
Anticipated matchups in the history of women's college basketball. Caitlin Clark and Iowa going up against the South Carolina Machine.
The most watched college basketball game, men's or women's, in over 30 years. 24 million people tuning in for a women's college basketball game. That number doesn't exist without Caitlin Clark. The figures from that season tell a story that needs no exaggeration. Iowa drew the largest television audiences in women's college basketball history. Not just for their biggest games, but for weeknight regular season matchups in January. Iowa women's basketball merchandise moved from a niche product to a national retail category. Road game attendance figures for Iowa opponents. Conversations centered around Clark's latest performance, around the record, around what she was doing to the game, were the kind of discussions that had simply never existed around any women's college basketball player before her. The effect on the WNBA became even more visible in the months that followed. Clark was the first overall selection in the 2024 WNBA draft, chosen by the Indiana Fever.
With the first pick in the 2024 WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever select Caitlin Clark, University of Iowa.
Her arrival set off a surge in ticket revenue, television ratings, and merchandise sales that the league had never previously experienced. WNBA contests featuring Clark were attracting television audiences that matched and at times exceeded NBA regular season games airing on the same networks. The league Clark entered as a first-year player was a visibly different commercial operation than the one that had existed before she stepped into it. The record was one piece of her legacy, and the transformation was another. For young girls watching, and there were millions of them, many experiencing women's college basketball for the very first time, the meaning of Clark's achievement was instant and personal. Here was evidence in real time on a national platform that the ceiling of what was achievable in women's sports had been relocated, not nudged, not raised by small degrees. The young girls who watched Caitlin Clark surpass Pete Maravich's record were witnessing a different version of what was possible, and the players who will come after Clark will do so, carrying the knowledge that the record she's established, 951 career points when her college journey was complete, is the new mountain, the new ceiling. And somewhere out there right now, in a gym, before sunrise or well after dark, someone is staring up at it. One shot, 50 years gone. That is the Caitlin Clark story in 3 words. A girl from Iowa who competed against boys in middle school, selected a program nobody expected to contend, and then rebuilt the record books so thoroughly that the sports world had to stop and ask, wait, what just happened? 24 million viewers for a women's college basketball game. WNBA arenas selling out from coast to coast. A generation of young girls watching a ceiling get demolished in real time. The record was just the headline. The movement is the story. If this video fired you up, like it, share it, and subscribe to Clark Fan World, because this story is nowhere near finished. Krna.